Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week I find myself limping because I'm an idiot. Like a lot of people who listen to this show or who've been on the show, I've blown out my knee before. When I did it, I had a horrible infection, I was bedridden for a couple months, and I had a PICC line to my heart to handle the infection. And there was a time where I didn't know if I would ever ski or snowboard again. Based on hearing that and how my leg has felt over the years, one thing I was certain that I would never do again was go running by choice. But my buddy and former Powell Movement guest, Corey Cote, has been inviting me to his run club every week for the past few months. This is something that he does out of his Mystery Made store in West Seattle every other Tuesday. And I'm always making an excuse why I can't go. But this week, everything lined up and I was going to do the run. I was excited and I was anticipating an easy run. But no, I show up for the hardest one they've ever done. And going down the big hill that we started on, I could feel the bone-on-bone pounding. And halfway through the 5K, I had to call it. While I felt weak for quitting, 3 days later, I'm still limping. My knee is really swollen, and I'm on a diet of ice and ibuprofen. This weekend, I'm heading over to Mission Ridge to MC a rail jam, and based on how I feel, I might not be able to ski. If it doesn't feel any better next week, I'm going to go in for a cortisone injection so I don't ruin my Tahoe trip for the Payne McShlonky in a few weeks. Honestly, the past 2 years, it seems like everything that can go wrong does go wrong in my life. But you know what? I can sit back and feel sorry for myself, or I can power through it. And I always choose to power through it. I mean, it's only pain, and pain is temporary, so I'm not too worried about it. But I thought I'd share that for the intro's sake, because I use the intro to update you on my life and times and keep the podcast all about my guest. And my guest this week is an athlete who's had a ton of injuries and heartbreak, but also so many wins. It's week 2 of Women's Month, that's what I'm told March is, and when I heard that, I made a plan to make sure that all my guests this month were women, and I'm going to do better to be more inclusive with women in my show roster as I move forward the rest of the year. But anyway, that brings me to my incredible guest. Not to be overshadowed by her injuries, Maggie Voisin has been to 3 Olympic Games. She has 7 X Games medals and is a total badass. Her podcast is a mix of the highest of highs and the lowest of lows that not all of us experience in life. It makes for a really heavy and interesting story. Before we get into it, I want to thank all of you for listening each week and ask you to tell a friend about the show and review me wherever you listen. Those things really do help the show grow. I also want to give a shout out and thank you to Die Cut Stickers for always gracing me with sticky goodness, and thank the good folks at Nema Vitamins for keeping me packed with energy. Those things really work and I highly recommend you trying them. And the most important thanks that I want to give goes to my sponsors. They make this show happen week in and week out, so please listen to their ads and buy from them. I only work with the best brands, and they are Outdoor Research, Stanley, Elan Skis, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Best Day Brewing, and Windell Ski Camp. Now, let's chat with Maggie Voisin. You just got done announcing the X Games, and announcing isn't what you spend your whole life doing. What was the biggest challenge doing that?
Honestly, I think just going in, it was a lot of self-pressure. Like you mentioned, I had never commentated before, let alone just being thrown into the X Games. And I actually shouldn't say I've never commentated before. I actually last season commentated one run at a World Cup.
Okay.
But the opportunity got brought to me by a couple people, but my Monster team manager, Josh Bishop, hit me up, I think maybe end of the summer, early fall. And was like, is this something you'd be interested in? And I was like, heck yes. I was like, I can't say no to this opportunity. But as it creeped closer and closer, I was like, oh my goodness, I am so nervous. Just what am I going to say? How does the process work? I just wanted to represent the ladies, for them to be represented in the best way possible. And I think that's where a lot of my anxiety came from. Because I was like, am I the person for this role?
Well, I can see the anxiety, but for representing the ladies, I mean, the internet coverage is great. But were you even aware that they weren't showing all of the women's ski or snowboard events on TV like they did with the men's?
I literally heard about that last weekend from one of my friends' dads, Rel Harwood. They're like, we didn't even see her runs. And I think he was referring to slopestyle. And I had no idea. And I know that that's happened in the past, back when I was competing. And it's crazy to believe that that's still happening.
I was thinking the same thing.
Were they cutting to commercial breaks? Like, what was going on?
After everything, I think it was Women's Pipe that went on at like maybe 3 or 4 o'clock one day, and it was light out. And they showed like 5 runs of it at like 10 o'clock after everything was over, like it was a live event. It was kind of a joke in that respect.
Now I see what you're saying, because some of them weren't fully broadcasted on like ESPN or NBC or wherever they were. But like you mentioned, some of them were live streamed and then they did like a replay. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, it just seemed like the women were good enough for the internet, but not good enough for live TV, and they saved all the time for the men's events, and then whatever time was left over was for the women's. And I was going to ask you if they talked about that in production meetings, and if you didn't say anything because you didn't want to rock the boat, but it sounds like you had no idea and you were just doing your thing.
I did not have any idea, no. And that's crazy. Like I mentioned, I heard that last weekend and was super bummed. But now that I know the right people, I think I will slowly start to put it in their ear, because we got to get that equality for sure.
How about the prize money? That's equal now, right?
Yes, it is. I don't know what year it became equal, but it has been at least my entire career. So my first X Games was in 2014. I actually loved Greta Eliasson posted something, I want to say like kind of pre X Games. It was probably around like the time when they were celebrating Sarah, but she posted a picture or something of when like the woman first got to compete in X Games, but they weren't really competing, but they were just proving that they could hit the same course as the men. So it's crazy to see how far things have come, and for those women who have absolutely paved the way for myself and the next generation of athletes.
Women or men, when you think about the prize money, what is the X Games gold worth? Is it like $25K?
It was 25, but I heard last year it got bumped down to 20 if you won. And I don't know what it was this year. I didn't hear, but now you've got me curious.
Well, in comparison, the best cornhole player in the world, his prize is $10,000, his or hers.
Are you kidding?
If you were to place 53rd at the Masters, you would make $45,000. If you were the best bowler, you'd make $100,000. Is it a bummer for you that skiers risk their lives and make pennies compared to what other sports make?
I think it is kind of ridiculous. But I mean, for me, it never was about the money. I think going into this sport, you know you're not going to come out rich. For myself, I'm like, I started it because I absolutely loved it.
But that's with most people in all sports, right? They love their sport and they're usually not in it to get rich. But then if you get to the NFL, you're stupid, filthy rich and you're like, whoa, this really worked out. But everybody gets into their sports because they love them for the most part, unless their parents are psycho and push them into it.
Yep. You get those every once in a while for sure. But yeah, I mean, of course, it would be great. I mean, like you said, cornhole, like how are they making that much money? And then we're hucking our bodies off of these massive jumps and doing crazy tricks. But once again, at the end of the day, like it's not about the money to me, but I also see where it seems pretty bizarre.
Yeah, I just look at the money as in like 30 years, it would be sweet if you had that cushion to just live off of from your X Games time.
It'd be sick.
Yeah.
Oh,
totally.
yeah. I mean, I would be stoked for sure. I'm not going to lie.
Well, that's enough talking about X Games, and I do think the coverage was a lot better this year. But back to your life and times, you grew up in Whitefish, Montana. It's a big family. You have 2 brothers and a sister. Your folks own a restaurant. And does that allow them to ski a lot, or were they chained to the restaurant when you were growing up?
So, yeah, I want to say my parents started, it's called Truby's, or was called Truby's, which is my dad's name. His name's actually Michael, but his middle name was Truby, and he's definitely a Truby if you meet him. But anyways, they started that about, I want to say a couple years before I was born, and my twin brother Tucker. And I mean, I think with the restaurant industry, it was more of a nighttime gig. They were just bar dinner. So my dad definitely got to work that whole, and for my dad specifically, he's the ski bum. I mean, I think he definitely worked that into his whole lifestyle, and he totally did before that. He's from Pennsylvania, but after college, he found Jackson Hole and was like, oh my gosh, I'm never going back to the East Coast, lived there, was in Aspen, and then found Whitefish. And all through that time, he was a chef in the kitchen. So, he'd ski all day and then work at night.
So he made the ski bum dream happen, and then he had like 4 kids, so he really has to pay for that because that's pretty crazy. But I'm sure he gets you on skis pretty much when you can walk. But it's more than skiing. I think you guys were on dirt bikes and sleds before you were in grade school. Was it one of those things where everyone in your family was always getting hurt?
I wouldn't say that, but yeah. I mean, we were a reckless bunch for sure, and then you add the Costains like Parkin in, and then things get really rowdy. But I think when I was around 3 years old, my dad got mini snowmobiles. He got 2 of them. And then he actually told my twin and I at the time, I think we were around 5 or 6, and he said, "If you get off training wheels, I will buy a dirt bike." And we had a gravel road at the time. So my twin and I were like determined. I think it only took us like a couple days. We were off of our training wheels. And I definitely have a bunch of scars and scratches from falling in the gravel roads. And growing up too, my parents actually called me Crash. It wasn't that I like got hurt, but I was just like reckless. We had a cement patio that was just kind of like ground level. And I ran the snowmobiles across like the whole patio into our like patio furniture. I like always was more focused on if people were watching me than what I was doing. I was running into trees, like, yeah. So I had a Crash was like a nickname from a pretty young age.
And then you spent a lot of time at the Stump Down Ice Den. Figure skating, was that something that was serious for you too?
I started figure skating. I can't even think how old. I started off with hockey, actually, just because that's kind of what my dad originally pushed my brothers and I into. And I did that for a year. And I think I actually liked hockey. I was super young. So this is like little kids, like we probably don't even know which way like to go for the goal.
Right.
But I played that for a year. And then all my friends were in figure skating. So I decided to change things up and figure skate. But for me, it was more fun. It was more just like hanging out with my friends. I loved it. You know, I liked doing the spins, whatever. And it's funny too, like I grew up such a tomboy. And I think for me, I also really liked putting on like the skating dresses. It kind of got me out of that like tomboy world, whether I like knew it or not then. I think I kind of actually enjoyed that.
Okay.
But I never was like serious. I did a couple competitions figure skating. I did one where my mom and I traveled. I can't remember if I definitely wanted to do it because my parents never pushed me into anything. But I got dead last or like second to last, and I just sobbed in the stalls, and my mom's like, "Oh my gosh." So I never competed again after that. And honestly, like I don't have a very competitive nature at all when it came to sports until I found skiing.
Thinking about like gymnasts, kids who grow up with gymnastics, they end up being really good with air awareness. And with figure skating, like with the spins and stuff you're doing, does that cross over later on to skiing at all, or is that not at all happening?
1000%. I mean, I could spin like a top when I was like 9 or 10 years old. It definitely, I think like the air awareness, but kind of just like that spinning, like balance, staying on your feet, it definitely played a huge factor for me at a young age.
Is it true that you learned sevens before Parkin?
So I didn't learn, well, okay. So we had, it's called the jump hill. We were both on the Whitefish freestyle team. And like I mentioned, I have a twin brother, a brother 2 years older, but my twin and I, him and Parkin were best friends. So we kind of all grew up together. Parkin and I were always really competitive. My twin Tucker, he's pretty laid back. So when it came to skiing, Parkin and I were always pushing each other. But I think we were 10 and I tried the 720 first. But Parkin would not have tried it if I didn't try it. But unfortunately, Parkin landed it first. So he has that claim. But like I said, I don't think he would have tried it if it wasn't for me.
So you're the one who's pushing him at least. He looks at it and he's like,
yeah,
man, Maggie's doing that. I've got to try it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then when you think about it, you're in the part of the freestyle team, and I think you had a park a little bit here and there, but you're really just chasing your brothers and parking all over the mountain. You guys are all skiing together.
Yep.
When do you think in your head that I want to be a pro skier? Do you remember when that clicked in your head?
12 years old. That's when I started to compete a little more like outside of Whitefish. I think I made USASA Nationals, which was at like Copper Mountain, which I think it's still there. And I ended up like winning in my age group. But that was like the year where I was like, I'm going to be a pro skier. And I knew it. And my parents too, my mom, she drove me everywhere. I don't know how she made it happen, but she did. And she just fully supported me and believed me. I mean, I don't know how you believe a 12-year-old when they say that. But,
well, you want to support your dreams. You don't want to crush them when you're 12. So she was just supporting what you had. She'd know in a couple of years if you weren't going to do it.
Exactly. Super true. Super true. But yeah, once again, it was 12. I was dead set. I knew it.
When you're little, I mean, even before that, slopestyle isn't in the Olympics. So are the X Games always the goal?
X Games was the goal. That was the dream.
And then who were your ski heroes growing up when you're watching X? Is it like you want to be Ashley Battersby?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Ashley Battersby, Kaya Tursky, Devin Logan, Anna Siegel, Dania Asley, Carrie Herman, like all of those girls. I mean, I'm skipping so many names as well, but those are the ones off the top of my head. I just remember Kaya too. Kaya had a lot of like, I forget what she called them. She did a lot of videos back then too. And I mean, I was just glued to my dad's computer. Like I could not stop watching skiing.
Like on New Schoolers all the time?
More YouTube. I actually like at a young age was really turned off by New Schoolers because there was like so much hate on women skiing back then.
Toxic
It
masculinity
was
place.
really toxic. Yeah. And I realized that at a young age and it like really, really bummed me out. So for me, I kind of stayed away from that.
Skiing's cool because you can meet your heroes. So when all those girls you look up to on TV, they're at summer camp. When was the first time you went to summer camp and who did you meet and kind of like were starstruck by?
So I was 11 years old when I went to Windell's for the first time, I think back in 2010. And Danya Asley and Ashley Battersby were my coaches. And I was just starstruck. I don't even know how. I don't know if it was Facebook. I don't even know. I don't even think I had Facebook. But I was just like messaging Ashley Battersby about like how excited I was to meet her. Probably like crazy overwhelming too. But yeah, that for me was insane. And then also Windell's too. Like back in the day, especially, there were so many pros riding there. Like, yeah, Sammy Carlson. I met Tom Wallish. Mike Hornbeck was my coach one year, like the year later or something. I mean, there were so many pros. You're just starstruck the whole time you're there.
And then that's probably the first proper park that you had been to, I would think, or the first really badass park that you were able to go to.
Yeah, definitely one of them for sure. I'm trying to think. Yeah, no, that's super true. It absolutely was.
Do you remember buying a Rasta A-bomb hoodie from Ashley?
Oh my gosh. Yep. There's a picture on Facebook somewhere, or Ashley has it.
I have it too.
You do?
I do.
Oh, sweet. I was going to say, it's such an epic photo. I mean, I'm 11 in that one. It's probably past my knees. And that's what I was really excited about going to Windell's. I knew I could buy an A-bomb hoodie. I have no idea why I picked Rasta. I probably just thought that was like the most G one ever.
And for you to progress in your skiing, like you need to get out of Montana. Like there is no big park where you're going to be able to get to that X Games level. What's the family conversation around you moving out of the house when you're just like a young teenager?
It kind of became obvious at like 13 after that, like the season where I was 13, where my skiing was like really progressing. I had won like junior nationals at that point, and I think USASA nationals. And I was the one that really, really pushed my parents into it. My mom, not that they were like hesitant, but once again, I think they too also saw like my talent and like they understood that I needed to leave. But I like begged my parents, at least from what I can remember. Gosh, it was so long ago. And I think when I was 12 or maybe it was 13, I went to the water ramps at the Utah Olympic Park here in Park City. You know, I got to meet like the coaches, and back then the team was called Axis. Now it's PC United, which is like the club team here at Park City. And I just kind of from there was like, oh, I think Park City is the place to go. And then of course, like I knew Tanner Hall from like a Lion, like everyone migrated to Park City. Like that was the place. And so I just kind of kept on my parents. And eventually when I was 14, we just kind of like made the decision that I was going to be a part of the Park City team. I was in 8th grade, so I was still going to go home, but I was going to travel out to Park City like a week before a contest and then travel to the contest with the team, go home. And then like before a contest, I would like come out to Park City for a week. And that of course like did not happen. Once I got out here, I was like, I want to stay. Like, I don't want to leave. So like a couple weeks turned into probably 3 months, and I got a host family and I started homeschooling, and we just made it happen.
When you kind of move away from the family at 13, 14 years old, and you're part of, the Axis Free Ride program, who are the girls that take you under their wing in Utah?
Back then, I mean, it was just mostly just riding with like the club team. I lived with a host family, and like, yeah, I think it was just like the whole team. I like I'd known Colby Stevenson for a bit, but he was on the team at the time, and there were just all these up and coming riders. So I kind of just became family with the people around me, and then the people that, of course, that I lived with. And they had like kids in the program as well. So I found a community super fast. And then a couple of my friends also, they were on the US ski team that year before me.
Okay.
So like Darian Stevens, she's from Missoula, Montana. So I kind of like already had a set group of, or like a couple people that I knew who were out here, even though I wasn't on the same team as them.
Okay, and at this point is kind of when everybody hears that slopestyle is going to make its debut in Sochi. You're still super young. Is there any thought that you could make the Olympic team, or is it more like you're thinking 2018 when you first get out there?
I don't even really remember. I was just so stoked on skiing and my progression that's like really what I focused on. Like, of course, I was like, I want to go to the Olympics one day. I want to go to the X Games, blah, blah, blah. But I was just so focused on my skiing. But I was on Axis moved out to Park City when I was 14, was on that team for 1 year. And like, it's insane how much my skiing progressed. And then that next season is when I made the US free ski team, got my first X Games invite, and kind of just like my rookie year on the circuit, and everything just started to unfold. And I just kind of like that peak of, I don't want to say peaking isn't the right word with my career because it was just the beginning, but that's where things really started to happen for me.
Now it's time for my first sponsor break, and I want you to buy all of your ski and snowboard gear from Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. Why Peter Glenn? Well, first and foremost, they're the little guy who's been getting people out on snow for over 65 years. They aren't trying to take over an industry by making a ton of branded products that compete with the brands they already sell. They're not trying to get you to stay at a hotel or sell you a vacation. Peter Glenn is about making sure you purchase the right products to ensure that you're going to have the most fun on the hill. And they have all the brands, all the products, and incredible deals both in-store and online. While other retailers focus on algorithms and AI, Peter Glenn is all about having the most knowledgeable staff that understands what you need. And if you've been following them on Instagram, they've been dropping some incredible pro tips that will make your time on the hill more enjoyable. At the end of the day, people have trusted Peter Glenn since 1958 because of their proven track record and all-around passion for snow and beyond. So if you ski, snowboard, inline skate, wakeboard, water ski, or need outerwear for your adventure, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports is your one-stop shop, and they offer free shipping on orders over $50, a hassle-free return policy, and they price-match reputable dealers. So please support this podcast and buy your stuff over at peterglenn.com. Next up, it's Elan Skis. I started telling you about Elan building a cult following in the States about 3 years ago. And if you're like me and heading up to the mountain on a weekly basis, I know you've been seeing more Elans. There's a reason for that. People who ski Elans notice that skiing on award-winning products made in what is considered the best factory in the world will make them a better skier. The product they put into the marketplace is second to none. I mean, Elan's a company that also makes luxury yachts, and they don't cut corners on materials or production. The difference in quality is noticeable. Walk up to any ski wall and compare the craftsmanship of an Elan ski to everything else on the wall. You'll see a difference in the fit and finish, but the most important difference is how they'll perform on snow. That's why Elan's been winning a ton of awards at the magazine tests, because they really do ski better. If you want to have more fun on the mountain this season, get on an Elan. You can find out about all things Elan over at elanskis.com. My final sponsor this round is Stanley, and if you haven't been hearing a lot about Stanley lately, you must be living under a rock. They've absolutely blown up in 2023, and everyone is talking about them. I've been telling you about how incredible their products are at keeping your drinks hotter and colder than anyone else's for about 7 years now. I mean, they invented the category in 1913, and while they always have done well, the world now knows that if you don't have a Stanley, you don't have the best. And I love having the best. Personally, I use Stanley pint glasses every single day, and I swear by them. And my wife and so many others can't live without their Stanley quenchers. And recently, I've integrated Stanley food storage devices into my ski routine. Instead of buying $20 burgers, we bring our food to the mountain and it stays piping hot in our Stanleys. And I end up saving about $70 a weekend not buying food. While that's rad, what's even radder is that Stanley offers Powell Movement listeners their biggest discount that they make available to the public. I'm going to save you 30% on all your Stanley products. Here's what you need to do to get that discount. Head on over to stanley1913.com, go shopping, and at checkout, enter the code SNOW30. That's all caps and the number 30 with no spaces, and you'll save that 30%. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. Well, I feel like the first big kind of international contest that you do well at is in Cardrona. You're in New Zealand. And do your parents travel with you? Or are you under the guidance of the U.S. team? How does that work when you do your first big international trip and you're super young?
Yeah, I can't remember if I was on the ski team yet or not.
I don't think you were at that point.
I don't think I was. No, I traveled with Axis.
Okay.
So there was a group of people that like went out because obviously with these like development clubs, some of these younger kids are at World Cup level, but they're not quite on the U.S. ski team yet. So you have a coach that you travel with and all of that.
Okay.
So I was traveling with Axis and we had a couple people with us who were also competing in the World Cup, but very few of us. And then some people too were also just on this trip to go and train. They weren't even competing.
Eventually, I think you travel a lot with Devin Logan. And when you're traveling with older girls and you're kind of like, they're almost your chaperone, do you get exposed to things that young kids do get exposed to when they're in Europe, like drinking and stuff like that on those international trips?
Oh, yeah. Yep. I mean, Devin just took me under her wing and she absolutely took care of me. But man, I grew up fast, to say the least.
What's the story about you almost getting hit by a car in Barcelona?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I want to say I was like 17, maybe 18. And we had just had a World Cup. I want to say I can't remember. I think it was France. I don't, anyways, it doesn't matter. But we had a couple extra days, or it was after the contest. We were flying out of Barcelona, and Dev and I were like, let's just stay an extra day. We got up that morning. We went to breakfast. We had like a dank meal. We had a mimosa, maybe. And we were like, let's bike around the city. And I'm, of course, the classic, like trying to like Snapchat or take a video while I was riding the bike. And I almost ran into a car or something, and I slammed on the brakes, which was, of course, was the front brake. I went over the handlebars. There was a basket on the bike, and the basket fell off the bike. And we're like in the busiest street in Barcelona. I don't remember if a car almost hit me, but so many people watched. I mean, I'm just like this blonde little girl, like classic, like phone out, all of a sudden just splatted on the concrete. And I didn't hit my head. I was completely fine, but I was like so embarrassed.
Okay. Well, I'm going to take it back to that Cardrona event. You end up fourth there. And then going into the next season, are you invited to all the things? Like, do you know that you're going to be at X Games, and do you have invites to Do Tour and all the World Cup events?
Yeah. So actually, the event that really, I feel like kind of where my name blew up or kind of got on the scene was back in the day when they did WSI.
Oh, yeah.
And that was in 2013.
That would have been like the end of that season, right? Yeah.
The end of that season. So I did well enough at like all like the AM events, and I got enough points to qualify for this event. I was 14 and I ended up winning. And that's where things really started to like get big for me. So I think that Cardrona event was after that.
Yeah, because that would have been late summer. So you get known there, you have Cardrona, and then going into the next season, the 2014 season, that's when you're invited to X Games. You get to Do Tour and all the World Cup events. When you're that young, are you training in the gym on trampolines, foam pits? Like, how do you prepare for what looks like to be the biggest year of your life?
I mean, for me, yeah, I got on the US ski team. So I kind of got wrapped up in that whole world and that team, which has been, so incredible the last 10 years. But yeah, we were tramping and stuff, but I don't know, like the dryland stuff has never really been my thing, if I'm being honest. And for me, it was just skiing. That was everything, so we probably like water ramped that summer or something. But other than that, like once winter got rolling and, New Zealand, and then I think back in the day we did Breckenridge or Colorado, like early November. And that's where things really started to get going. And that's where we had our first Olympic qualifier, which was the Do Tour.
And that thing is on your 15th birthday, I feel like. And most people, they're getting their learner's permit, but you take third at Do. And is that like the first huge podium with, I get that WSI was a really big one, but Do Tour is like huge where there's a lot of cameras and a lot of media. And was that the first time you were exposed to that?
That was the first time, which was crazy. And yeah, like you said, I think I even like qualified first going into that, like into finals. It was wild. Things just like happened so fast for me. And like you mentioned, I ended up getting third. It was my 15th birthday. And that was also the first, I think it was the first Olympic qualifier going into the 2014 games. And then that for me is when I kind of had like this oh shit moment of like, I can make this team. I could go to the Olympics.
And when you're the new young girl on the U.S. team, like you say, Sochi's right around the corner, there's only so many spots. And while you did do well in some contests, you didn't do what was needed to automatically qualify, and you're 15. Who expects you to do that? But I think it comes to the coach's discretionary pick. Who were you up against for that last spot? Was it like you and two other girls, and the coaches have to make that tough decision, and you get it?
I don't quite remember. Yeah, I got the discretion spot at that point. I mean, I competed well. There was an event that I missed because I kind of had a little knee issue going. And then, like you mentioned, like the last like couple events, like I just could not put it together like I needed to. But I was pretty much like in the fourth place spot. They just didn't know if they could take 4. They for sure could take 3 girls, but they didn't know if they could take 4. And so there's like a whole side to like how many they can take, because we only have so many spots within all of like freestyle, which is like moguls, aerials, half pipe slope style. So that kind of all comes combined. So it's like, okay, are the mogul skiers stronger than the slopestyle skiers? Like, who should we give that extra spot to? So it came down to that coach's discretion spot. And I literally for like, I can't remember, for like the 2 days that I like was finding out or waiting to see if I made the team, I just like sat and laid in bed. I was so nervous. I wanted it so badly. And it was actually after the last Olympic qualifier, we had like X Games a couple days later, because usually X Games is right before the Olympics.
Yep.
So Olympic qualifying ended and we were driving. I say we, it was like another one of my teammates, Darian, my coach at the time, DJ Montigny. We were driving from Park City to Aspen for X Games. And he got a call when we were like halfway. And he looks at me and he's like, sorry, I need to pull over. Take this call. And I was like, oh my God, I know what this is. Like, I just knew it. I knew what the call was about. So my teammate and I, we like got out of the car and I was just like pacing outside. I was like, oh my gosh, I know what this call's about. We eventually got back in and he like looks over at me and just gives me like a fist bump. And he's like, you got it. And that's how I found out that I got the Olympic spot, which is pretty funny, like on our drive, on our way to X Games, my first X Games.
That's incredible. And I would think that that means you go into X Games with more confidence than ever.
Absolutely. Yeah. I also remember too, like my coach back then, he told me when he was in those like meetings where they were like talking about who are we going to take? Should we give her the coach's discretion spot? He told me once, like way later, once he retired, he's like, I told everyone, whoever everyone is, he was like, watch this girl go win X Games and you guys just regret not taking her to this Olympics.
That's perfect.
And obviously I didn't end up winning X Games, but I ended up getting second against Kaya Tursky, which was absolutely unbelievable. But yeah, I went into X Games. Well, once again, like that was my childhood dream since I was 12 years old. Skiing at the X Games was everything I ever wanted. And I finally was there and I was doing it. And I really do feel as a rookie, like, even though I had competed and, had a couple podiums before that event, I was like, I have nothing to lose.
Is that why you try to throw the switch 10 in practice? Because you're like, I have nothing to lose. And if I land this, I might win.
Yeah. And I just felt it. It wasn't even about winning. Like I just already kind of had my jump run dialed and I had the switch 7 and I'd never done a switch 10 before. And I was like, I just want to try the switch 10. It wasn't even to like do it in the contest. I was like, I just want to try switch 10. And they're like, okay. And first try, I go off. I think I did it. There were 4 jumps at the time. And I did the switch 10 on the second jump, stomped it, and then just like did a switch 180 off the second jump. And I remember my coaches just being like, oh my gosh, when we saw you just like do the switch 1 off the third jump after the switch 1080, we were like mind blown. And then it came to the contest and I landed my first run with the switch 7. And I was like, well, I'm not going to not try the switch 10. And things just really flowed. I think once again, it was like that mentality of I have nothing to lose. This is my dream to be here at X Games and I'm going to put it all out on the table.
And it's amazing. You get the silver medal there. Kaya gets the gold. That's just to be expected. I feel like at that point she was so on fire.
Oh, for sure.
And then I think your first sponsor was the Whitefish Convention and Visitors Bureau, which is a weird one. But your first big sponsor is Monster, I think. And how did that one come together?
So at the time, like I mentioned, after WSI is how my name kind of got out there. And it was shortly after that event that I got my agent, Tom Yaps, who I'm still with. Shout out to Tom. He's the man. He's been there with me through all the ups and downs of my entire career. But he really like helped me get on Monster. Monster signed me too, like right after WSI, like before I had done really anything or gotten that 2-tour podium, which to me was pretty crazy. And it was funny. Tom and I always joke. My parents are like involved. He had like the first couple conversations with them. But then like once he had the conversations, like him and I just communicated. He was just talking to a 15-year-old. We've always like my parents have always kind of stayed out of it. And I remember like in the summer before going into that winter, he was like, yeah, I'm talking to Monster. I think they're interested. And I was just like 15-year-old was like, what?
Yeah.
Monster? Like having an energy drink on your like helmet, like that's huge. But anyways, that's kind of the short story to that. And then I remember at Cardrona in New Zealand at that event is when I got my first Monster helmet. And I like wouldn't let anyone touch it. I wouldn't let a scratch on it. I was psycho. I was proud.
And then leading into the Olympics, I think you were getting free skis from Armada. Who else wasn't paying you but was going to get Olympic exposure out of you?
I think just Armada. I was just on Armada skis. I believe I had an Oakley contract at the time too, but I'm having a hard time remembering. Yeah. And I was gonna sign with Armada kind of shortly after that, but then K2 swept in and we decided to go that route. Yeah.
We'll talk about them in a minute. But going into that Olympics, I think you're the youngest woman in the Olympics since 1972. Being that you're so young, do you get the lion's share of the press leading up to the games? And is that like a total like pressure cooker for you, not knowing how to handle it all?
It was definitely crazy. I think what I was more nervous about, I think in my head, like I was like spooked about the whole like we're going to Russia, la da da. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I think I've always kind of been a more anxious person. And at that age, I just didn't know what to expect. So I remember like getting off the plane and like people trying to talk to you and interview you as you're like walking out, of the airport. And I was like, just don't talk, just look straight forward. Like, I don't know. I just didn't know what to expect. I was like, I just don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to make a fool of myself. But there was really no nerves for me about being like the young gun. Once again, I'm a rookie going into this season and I'm like, I'm here. I'm at the Olympics. Like, I just want to ski the best that I can. I came off a silver at X Games. I like came in with the mentality of like, I could win this event.
Well, I would think just getting into the X Games is harder than getting into the Olympics almost, because there's only a limited number of women that get into the X Games. With the Olympics, there's a limited number for each country, but there's a lot more people.
No, absolutely. It's still like the Olympic process is stressful because you are competing against your teammates for those spots. I don't even know how to describe the pressure. It only comes every 4 years and you want it. You want to be on that team. And it's a lot. It's a lot leading up to the Olympics and that whole process.
And then with your life, there are some super high highs, like getting an X Games silver at 15 years old. But then there are low lows. And your first big one is in training for the Olympics. You end up breaking your fibula. And is that just crushing?
Yeah, it was absolutely devastating. I mean, and it was just so stupid. Like the crash was so stupid. It's hard to explain, but the rail section was just super tight. And I was trying to hit this one rail switch and I bailed. I ended up bailing and then running into another rail accidentally and like twisting up my ankle. Like it was just a foolish little mistake, and of course those things happen. But I didn't even understand or know how to deal with like the devastation at that age.
Do you feel like you're letting everyone down? Like, I think your folks traveled all the way out to Russia and you've got that discretionary spot and everybody's like wanting you to do well because you did well at X. And is it like, oh man, I'm hurt now?
Absolutely. I mean, it was a combination of everything, like you mentioned. And I remember the day I got hurt was the day of opening ceremonies. I think it was like the third day of training. My parents had just gotten to Russia, my mom and my dad and my grandma. And I didn't even know how to tell my parents. And it was a huge deal for them to come to the Olympics. Like I found out I was going 2 weeks before the game. So my parents, they had to like scramble for visas. And like, I can't even imagine how much money they had to like come up with, or the people that like helped them get there and all of that. And then, yeah, I think all of it too, like you mentioned the discretion spot, but the most devastating part was like, I knew I could do so well and that opportunity was just gone and I would have to wait another 4 years. And what was crazy is like when I crashed, I thought I was fine. I fractured, like you mentioned, my fibula right above my ankle and I was able to walk, but eventually like it kind of got more sore. But right away I was like, oh, I'll be back in a run.
A ski boot's a good cast.
Yeah, it's a great cast. But I remember telling my coach, I was like, just let me chill. Like I'll be back in a run. And I ended up getting like an x-ray later that day. And also too, I remember like there are hospitals within the Olympic Village, like where the athletes stay. And they're like, not really hospitals, they just kind of put medical devices like in this building. But I remember looking at the x-ray before my doctor had looked at it and I saw a crack. And obviously it's like hard to tell when you're looking at bones. So I wasn't sure, but I was like, that doesn't look like it's supposed to be there.
Yeah.
And that is when my heart sunk. And then the doctor came out, our team doctor, and told me the news. And I just like, I broke down. I mean, I was 15. Yeah, it was crazy. And I ended up staying the rest of the games, to be there. But it was really, really hard for me. Like I said before, I don't think I, at 15, like really understood how to deal with that circumstance. It was devastating.
And knowing that you could have had a run where if you landed it, you could actually walk with a gold medal. I mean, that has to make it even that much tougher.
Yeah. And I'm someone too, like I don't really say these things, but that was like one of the contests where I was like, I'm going to win this. I can do this. Like I'm not someone who's usually like that. My mindset when I go out and compete is like, I want to ski the best that I can that day, and whatever happens, happens. And for me, that Olympics, I was like, I'm on fire. Like I just felt it. So yeah, it was really tough. And going into opening ceremonies too that day, I hadn't told my parents. I was so nervous. And I knew my parents were going to be at opening ceremonies. And obviously it's hard to like spot me out in the crowd amongst like 200 other US team athletes. But I ditched my crutches and just walked on my broken ankle because I was like, oh my God, if my parents see me and I'm on crutches, like my mom is going to have a heart attack. And I made my physical therapist tell my parents I didn't have the nuts.
Oh.
I was like, I couldn't do this. And I will be honest, telling your parents you're injured is probably the worst thing in the world. And I've had to do it way too many times.
It's time for my final sponsor break, and I can't tell you how much I love my gear from Outdoor Research. When I signed on with OR, I knew there wasn't an outerwear brand on the market that performs as well as what OR is developing. That's what happens when you test your gear in the absolutely terrible conditions that we can get here in the Pacific Northwest. Days in the mountains are always more fun when you're warm and dry, and I know my OR gear will always deliver that. I'll tell you, on cold days, I live in my cold front hoodie, which is hands down the warmest and most stylish puffy I've ever owned. And then when I get on snow, my snow crew jacket and pants are not only warm, but it's one of those fits where if you don't see me ski, I look like a pro. I'm so impressed with the style that OR has been bringing to the table lately. And off snow, they sent me some Feroci pants, which are now my daily drivers. Think stylish, lightweight, packable, do-anything pants with the right amount of zippered pockets and stretch to be the only pant that you'll ever need. I've been loving OR products since I bought my first OR rain jacket in 2000. And really, if you missed out on using my old discount code for OR products, well, I'm working on getting you a new code, but I can't promise anything. Sometimes you snooze, you lose. So check back for that, and in the meantime, head on over to outdoorresearch.com and check out why they're one of the fastest growing brands in snow and beyond. My next ad comes from the crew at We Are Camp. I'm talking about the best ski, snowboard, and skate camps in the U.S. High Cascade is the snowboard camp, Windell's is the ski camp, and Seek is the skate camp. And if you want to be a great parent, I highly recommend signing your kid up for a week or two of camp. I can tell you from firsthand experience that going to Seek Skate Camp helped my kid in so many ways. Not only did he get so much better at skateboarding, he was able to make lifelong friends that have shared interests, and that's a hard thing to do these days. And whenever the subject of camp comes up, my kid lights up and starts selling it to whoever's listening because it was that fun for him. On top of all that, my kid has never been more appreciative and stoked. I mean, he's a high schooler, and sending him to camp helped make Ange and I cool again in his eyes. And now we can hold it over his head. If you want to go to camp again, buddy, you need to get good grades. And so far, that approach is working, and I know you can use that approach too. I'll tell you more about the camps in the coming months, but for now, head on over to windells.com, highcascade.com, or seekskatecamp.com to find out all the details and reserve a spot. You only have your kid for a limited time, and sending them to camp will make them love you a lot more. My final sponsor this round is Best Day Brewing. If you haven't heard of Best Day, they are hands down the best tasting non-alcoholic beer on the market. I enjoy Best Day for so many reasons. The flavor is the most important. I swear by the hazy IPA, the Kolsch, and the Belgian White. They all taste just as good or better than their alcoholic cousins. And I'll tell you, while I haven't quit drinking, when I go to the bar, after 3 or 4 beers, I usually feel like it's time for me to head home, and everyone thinks I'm lame. But lately, I have a new routine. I'll have a Best Day every 3rd beer, and it makes my night last twice as long. And we all know lasting longer is better. If you want to have your best day or night ever, or just enjoy a few cold ones at Après, grab a Best Day, and you can forget about the calories, forget about the alcohol, and forget about getting in trouble on the way home. To see all the flavors and order some beer, head on over to bestday.com. And if you're flying Alaska, you can now get a Best Day Kolsch at 30,000 feet. Those are my sponsors. Now let's get back into the podcast. You head back home injured. You get a call eventually from Alyssa Clark, and she tells you that she wants to sign you to the team. She's with K2. She's also a fellow Montanan, and she is so psyched to have you on the program. So you have a new ski sponsor. Does anybody else sign you at that point?
I think at that point, maybe that's when I locked in with Oakley too, was after that time, because I was with them for about 5 years. I actually had an Olympic sponsor. I was on Pop-Tarts for that Olympic year. You always kind of get random Olympic sponsors, and I had a Pop-Tart sticker on my helmet. It was pretty sweet. And then I signed with Visa at the Olympics. and I signed a 5-year deal with them. So it went
Sick.
all the way through the 2018 Korea Games.
So you've got these sponsors. People are really stoked on you. And that's pretty important when you're hurt, because I could think that it could get to your self-confidence and everything if people are backing away from you after you get injured at the Olympics. But that doesn't happen. So people believe in you. But then you finally get yourself back. And can you describe what happens at the Dew Tour, which is, I think, your first event back post-Sochi?
Yeah. So it was December of 2014 going into the 2015 season. And I was just ready to like prove myself going into that season. Of course I had a good year last year, but I was like, people might just think I'm a rookie and it was a one-time season deal. I was like, this is my year, once again, coming off of the Olympics as well, that whole situation. I was like, this is my year. Like, I'm going to prove it. So it was Dew Tour. I qualified first going into finals. And then my first run in finals, I ended up over rotating in right side 720. I went really big, landed backseat, and tore my left ACL and lateral and medial meniscus.
Ooh. When you think about that, I mean, that's an injury that's going to take 8 months to a year to really get back on snow. But I mean, I've done it, and I feel like it took me 2 years to finally feel like myself again. But for you, you have to call these sponsors, I would think. Is it tough calling Alyssa and people at Visa and being like, hey, just want to let you know I'm going to be out for another year?
Well, thankfully, my agent has been super helpful with that. Like, he always kind of like sends out the news, and then I always follow up, like, please reach out. Like, I'm here to talk. I'm here to have a conversation. So, I mean, that never was like the bummer for me. I feel like I shouldn't say I didn't stress about the sponsors, because that first year when I like got on Monster, I remember having a conversation with Danya Asley, and I was like, I just feel so much pressure. Like, it definitely changes things when, you're young and you get signed to these big brands. But when I tore my ACL, like, I don't think it was a concern, because I just knew I was going to come back. It was another shitty situation, like, it's so frustrating to be first event back from the Olympics and that happened. But I had no doubt in my mind that I wasn't going to come back and still be one of the best.
So it doesn't mess with your self-confidence or anything like that?
I mean, probably at the time a little bit, like, of course, like some, but I feel like I'm someone who always, I don't know if it's how I grew up or my parents, but like, I always try to shift myself to a positive perspective. Even when I don't feel like I can, like, I'm like, I'm going to find like something positive within this. And for me, I love skiing. I love everything about it. And, nothing was going to stop me. Like, this ACL, my breaking my ankle, none of this was going to stop me from having the career that I know I'm capable of or had.
You getting back on snow, you start skiing well again. I think this is when you start learning different nine variations, and it's like, eventually I think you have 3 different nines. And is it one of those things where you have a bag of tricks where you almost feel unstoppable if you land your run, like nobody has what you have at that point?
To be honest, I feel like I never really got to that point, and it actually took a couple years for me to find my groove again after my ACL. Like, I don't think I had another X Games podium for 4 years.
It was like Norway, right? You got a bronze?
Maybe, yeah. Maybe it was 3 years, sorry. But I always think back to like Aspen. But, I had like a couple World Cup podiums, and I was like right in the mix. And I always was top 5, like always right up there. But yeah, it took me a second to find my groove. And it was kind of right before the 2018 games, 2017. I think I learned the unnat 9. So I had, the 3 900s. And I knew that the unnat 9, so the right side 900, cork 9, was going to be a big addition to my run. But I mean, at that time, like, there were so many up and coming girls, and like Kelly Silderu. I can't say I ever got to the point where I was like, if I land, I'm going to win. Just because at that point, going in, I feel like from 2014 to 2018, the field of girls had just gotten so deep.
They caught up to you?
Or not even caught up to me, but I mean, maybe, I guess, but just back in the day, there were only a handful of girls kind of in the beginning.
Yep.
But the scene grew, and there were so many talented females, which is incredible. But the competition just got harder.
2018 was another Olympic year. I think you win a Dew Tour, and then you get second at a Grand Prix. And this time you earn your spot on the Olympic team. You actually qualify. Mm-hmm. You don't need a coach's discretionary. Does that mean more than a discretionary pick, or does it not matter at all?
To me, or you mean just in general?
No, to you.
Yeah, it meant a lot. And I think for me, it just showed like my hard work. Because when I hurt myself in 2014, I was like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get back to this next Olympics. Absolutely everything. And I think for me, it just kind of like solidified that hard work that I had put in the last 4 years and everything that I had been through up to that point.
Going into X, which is before the Olympics, I'm sure there's no pressure because at this point you've made the team, you've battled back from injury, and you've gotten back to exactly where you want to be. The Olympics are going to be where the big pressure is going to be on your shoulders, I would think. Does that make X Games a totally different experience for you?
Absolutely. And I mean, for me, like every year going to X Games, it's always my favorite event. And I think, like you mentioned, like just knowing that I made the Olympics, I was like, let this just be like a fun event. Just enjoy it for what it is. Like I love the X Games. And I think that year it all clicked for me that day in slopestyle. And it was truly something special. I never had such flow state in my life ever competing besides that day at X Games. It was pretty unbelievable. Before the contest started, I knew I was going to win. It was crazy. Once again, I never ever experienced that before in my career. That was a one-time thing. Like training just was going so well and I just really, really felt it. And like I hadn't even pieced my whole run together until the contest.
But you knew.
But I just knew. And then I found out we had like sled laps. We always have sled laps right before the event when we're practicing. And I just randomly was placed last to drop. That's just like where the run order landed. And I remember telling myself when I found out, I'm going to have a victory lap today. And I get goosebumps saying it because it was so crazy. I just have never had that experience before. And I almost got emotional when I said that to myself before the contest. And then on my first run, I just like absolutely laced it and ended up getting like a score in the 90s and it held on the entire time. And I got my victory lap. That's the first and only time that I've ever had a victory lap.
Oh, that's amazing. And it's the biggest win of your career. I mean, you've won another gold at Norway X Games, but that doesn't compare to Aspen X Games.
It doesn't. No.
Can you describe what it's like achieving a goal that you set for yourself when you were like 11 or 12 years old?
Yeah. I mean, it was really emotional. Once again, like, of course, my dream was to go to the X Games, but everyone's dream is to win X Games gold. And to do it in Aspen, too, was like above and beyond. Like, I still don't even have words besides just like, it was so emotional in like the best way. And my mom was there and my sister was there. I had like really good friends there. And it just, yeah, it was a dream come true. That was something I dreamed up when I was 12 years old and it finally happened. And I think just like the Olympic experience and breaking my ankle and the ACL, like the ups and downs, I hadn't had an X Games Aspen podium in 4 years since my first X Games. And for me, you know, it just shows like that hard work and dedication. And oh, it was a wild day.
Then it's off to South Korea, and I would think while at X Games there was no pressure on your shoulders. When you're the X Games gold medalist heading into the Olympics, you had your victory lap at X Games. Is it more pressure than anything you've ever experienced in your life?
Yeah, and I think it was pressure that I put on myself more than anything. I've always been pretty good about like ignoring the outside pressure, but I put so much pressure on myself. Once again, I think like there's so much emotion from qualifying, you know, like once you make the team, it's like the qualifying is stressful, but you make the team and there's so much excitement. And then like you get on the plane and you're going to the Olympics and you have what we call team processing and you're getting the gear and you're getting all your Olympic clothes and it's so fun and exciting. And then you get there and you're like, okay, now it's time to get serious. And then you're kind of back in the emotions and it's stressful. And then, like I mentioned, I put so much stress on myself.
That usually doesn't make for a good competition because when you have that much pressure on yourself, it's not like you're at the X Games where you've already made the Olympic team and there's no stress in your head. When I think about it, it's like you almost didn't make the finals. How stressful was it when you're sitting in 12th and you're watching Mi-yoon Lee almost take your final spot?
Oh my gosh. I couldn't believe it. I absolutely couldn't believe it. And for me, I'm someone who's always done pretty well under pressure. So even though like I felt it, I was like, I've always been like, okay, I can perform. And usually at a World Cup too, they only take 8 girls to finals out of 30. And that's kind of the same at the Olympics, 30 girls, but they take 12 to finals. So for me, I'm like, okay, easy peasy. Like they're taking 12 girls, just like put down an easy run. And I just had like a couple bobbles in my run. And I also like two on my first run. I had like a pretty big mistake. I was supposed to do like a rodeo 9 and go and switch into the second jump. And I went small and did a road 7, and I had to like make up the rest of my run. And that was kind of where like my big mistake came from. But I went pretty early, and sometimes that gets you. Like I just had like kind of a low score.
Oh, yeah, because the judges are like on a scale.
Yeah, maybe not even that. Maybe it was my second run. But I remember my second run was worse than my first run, and they scored me higher on my second run.
Ugh.
But still not that high. And like you mentioned, I was sitting 12 out of 12. And I remember too, like, once you're done with qualifying, they like make you go through these like gates to talk to media. And I was just so stressed. Like, I remember, let's say, like, I could be wrong. Let's say I was put in 8th, but there were so many more girls to drop because, like I mentioned, I dropped pretty early in qualifications. So I'm like trying to focus on my media, but I'm like looking back up at the scoreboard and I'm just seeing my name get dropped lower and lower and lower. So I'm like fucking stressing, like,
Yeah.
oh, like unbelievable. And I eventually just like, I was so stressed. I went back to the top of the course and I like found my coaches. And I mean, I was pacing. And then this NBC guy at the top of the course wouldn't get the camera out of my face while qualifying was going. And I was just like so pissed off. I was like, I just wanted this guy out of my face. And the only way that I could get some peace and quiet was if I went and sat in the porta potty. I'm not kidding. So I sat in the porta potty. I was like, I can't get this guy away from me because he obviously wants my reaction. And I swear like it took forever to get the last score. Forever. I swear the judges like took their time. Like they were just like, who should we give it to? But also for me, like Fleetwood Mac, at least in the past, was always kind of like a good omen for me. So if I heard them come on, if I was in like a grocery store, I'm like, oh, good omen. And I remember coming out of the porta potty finally, still not waiting to see the score. And also like before that too, I was like talking to my coaches. I'm like, the score is posted. I'm like, they had to have posted the score. And he's like, no, they haven't. And I'm like, you're lying to me. I just didn't make finals. Like, you're lying to me. Just tell me I didn't make it. He's like, Maggie, I swear. But then I remember at some point I heard Fleetwood Mac come on. And that was kind of my good omen. But then eventually, like, score came and I found out that I qualified 12 out of 12. And that stress was over.
So you make the finals. We won't really talk about the finals, but we'll say that you end up in 4th place, which to me is like the worst position. It's the first position without a medal. Do you leave South Korea pretty angry with yourself and like, I'm going to come back again and get a medal?
Yeah, it mentally was really tough for me. And you have 3 runs in finals.
Right.
And on my first 2 runs, I crashed on the last jump. Like perfect runs, crashed on the last jump, first 2 runs. So going into the 3rd and final run, I remember just being like, I don't care, just like land, like just land. And we also had finals the same day, which usually we'll do qualifications and then finals the next day. So anyways, qualification happens and then I have like an hour to shake off qualifications to get myself into finals. But yeah, like you mentioned, I ended up getting 4th and it was really, really tough for me. Yeah, I just think once again, it kind of like reflected back to 4 years ago. And I just put like I mentioned, so much pressure on myself. I wanted an Olympic medal. I felt like at the time that was like the one thing I was missing in my career was an Olympic medal. So it was really tough for me. And after the Olympics, like once we were done competing, my body just like shut down. I got super sick. I think like finally my body was like, okay, we're going to sink into this stress and you need to chill out.
Okay. At this point, I'm going to get into the heaviest part of the podcast, and it's a few years later after that Olympics, and your brother Michael commits suicide in 2021. I hate even saying it, but I mean, it's part of your life. And based on his resume of like being the homecoming king, the captain of the football team, completing airborne school and infantry training, did it seem like he was the last person in the world that you would have anything to worry about?
Yes and no. I'm trying to reflect back. To me, I say no, because like all of the things that you mentioned, like he was just such a go-getter in life. People always would be like, oh my gosh, like you're the Olympian, you're such a hard worker. I'm like, you have not met my brother, Michael. But also like, yes, because I always say I'm such like a worrier and a stressor, but I have like a positive outlook, whatever. Like I think I'm really good at finding like that positive, even though I can go down kind of the bad path, not in that deep of a sense.
Sure.
But my brother is like me times 10, times like 100.
Just like super positive all the time?
No. In the sense of like just overthinking.
Oh, okay.
He put so much pressure on himself. Like I thought I put pressure on myself. Oh my goodness. My brother like to a whole nother level. But still, once again, like it came out of the blue. just because he was such a positive guy and all that. But I mean, it seems to be a common theme sometimes with people, even the most positive people.
Yeah, you never know what's going on behind the
You
scenes
never
in someone's
know.
head.
Yeah, and I think my brother didn't like to show that either. Of course, he just wanted to always be like the strong one, achieving these great things. And he was going into ranger school. Yeah, none of us saw it coming. It blew my mind. It blew our mind. Yeah.
And then when you think about like the aftermath, it's so, I mean, everything's so sad, but the aftermath isn't something that people think about until it happens. And what does it do to the family? Does it put all of you, like, does everybody come home and is everybody in a rut for a long, long time?
Yeah. So at that point, I unfortunately had it was 2020 COVID, and I had another knee surgery. And I was that season coming back from another knee surgery on my left knee. And I was going to X Games. That was going to be my first event back. And a couple days before that, we got the news. And I was like, screw skiing.
Yeah,
Family
totally.
always comes first. Thankfully, my boyfriend was with me in Utah when I found out the news. Thank goodness. I was living alone at the time. But we just packed our bags, and my whole family met back in Montana. My sister, my brother, our significant others. And we spent a week actually in Missoula, Montana. So not back in Whitefish, which was a good thing because we just wouldn't have been able to go anywhere without being stopped.
Yeah.
People didn't know our family, which was really important. And we just really had a whole week together then to just grieve and be left alone as a family. And there was so much too, with the army, things were just the army had all the control. My parents had no control, so we had a casualty officer who had to deliver us this news. And my mom's stressing because where is my brother's body? There were just so many unanswered things, and it was weird. And I feel bad for the guy, the casualty or whatever his title was. He has to sit with these families and whatever. But yeah, it was a crazy time. And to be honest, I only competed once that season. Family to me was everything, and I spent as much time with them as I possibly could. And a good friend also told me, she was like, hey Maggie, if you don't sit and deal with this, because it's obviously a year out from the Olympics, when it comes time for you to really have to get back into things, if you don't process this, you're gonna crumble. And I just took that to heart, and I tried to kind of go back to competing a month or so after. And I just remember I was terrified of skiing, and I think I was so emotionally drained. How could you physically push yourself and do what we have to do to perform when you're just emotionally dead?
I mean, you have to be at the top of your game at that point, and
Yeah.
you're not when you have that going on. One thing
Yeah.
that I was questioning asking, but I'm just going to ask anyway. Is there a letter that he leaves, or is there anything that gives you as a family a little closure, or are you just left with question marks?
Nothing.
Oh.
Yeah. Question marks. Yeah.
I'm sorry to even bring that up, but
no, it's something that I think it's important to talk about. And I've always been more open about it than maybe some people would be, because I think it is something that's important. These conversations are important.
And I guess when it comes back to fall and you're starting to get your head back into the right headspace to be able to compete because you want to make the Olympics, can you use your brother as almost like a inspiration and tribute? Do you use him as motivation?
Always. Yeah. He's my angel. He's my number one angel. I always remember myself that. And whether people find that funny or not, he's always on my side. And I think it's something that I think about every day. And I have, since the day that it happened. And what can you do moving forward? Grief comes in waves, but for me, it was just having that attitude of okay, yeah, I've accomplished so much in my career at a young age, but my brother, once again, I've never seen anyone work as hard as he has. And I just wanted to channel that for myself and for him. Yeah, it was huge motivation for me.
And then leading up to the games, go figure, you end up doing something to your knee again. Is it holy shit, here we go again? Or is there more nothing is going to stop me from qualifying for the Olympics?
Once again, wave of emotions. I did have a moment of here we go again. I was unsure if I thought my season was over. I was my career's over. But then the first initial emotions when you get injured, it's just so dark and gloomy. But then I had a little time to myself, and I was wait a minute. I have been through way too much. I'm not going to let anything stop me. I just was I can push through this. I was I am so capable I know my body, I know myself, and I want this so badly. So once again, it was kind of that wave of emotions where from the beginning, I was like doom and gloom. And then I was like, no, 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 no. I'm not going to let anything stop me from this.
But you don't qualify until February. Is that totally
Hmm.
nerve-wracking? Like, you've always qualified early.
I already had one Olympic, or I was like the top US girl at the first event, which was the season before. When I mentioned I only competed at one event, I just skied the one Olympic qualifier the season before,
Okay.
and I was the top American. I got fifth or something. So I kind of had that on my side. And I think, once again, just I knew if I could ski and ski well, I knew that the team would probably take me.
Yeah, like that's when a discretionary thing, if it came down to that, they were going to put you on because they know what you're capable of.
Yeah, but also too, I think I was within the top four range as well.
Yeah, I mean, you did make it. I mean, you earned your
Hmm.
thing in February, so that didn't really
Yeah.
matter. And then this Olympics, it's like the COVID Olympics. How does that totally change the experience for you?
I mean, it was wild. I kind of like separated from my team, and my boyfriend, Gage, he actually traveled with me for the 3 weeks leading up to the Olympics just because of like my knee. And I think like the whole past year, like I needed that emotional support. And because like my boyfriend isn't a part of the ski team, like your own team was like your bubble and you couldn't leave that bubble, like COVID bubble. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I'm breaking free from the team. And like my boyfriend and I are just doing this thing alone. Like I need him. And I could not have done it without him. Like, as much as I say nothing was going to stop me, I was still an emotional wreck. Like, I just had so many highs and lows with my knee and just like the past year. Like, it was really, really tough for me. But still, my end goal, I knew that I was capable. But I had his support. And once I made the Olympic team, oh, I think where I was getting at with that too was like, you did not want to get COVID before going to the Olympics. If you got COVID right before the Olympics and couldn't test negative, you were screwed.
It took away 4 years of working really hard.
Yeah, that was the biggest element of stress. It was like, oh my gosh, if I get COVID, like I'm done.
Like, screw my knee, I can't get sick.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So like my poor boyfriend on all these trips, like I would go out training and I'm like, you have to stay here. Like you can go for walks, but I'm like, can't go into restaurants. I'm like, you are on lockdown. That was kind of nice too. Just instead of being with like the whole team, it was just him and I. So still, less people, less chances of getting COVID, hopefully.
Right.
And then that whole like process going to the Olympics, like we ended up going to LA, the people who made the team, and we had like this whole team processing there. And we had to pass like multiple COVID tests to get on the plane. And then when you got to China, you had to test negative. So there was so much stress like flying to China. And then every day you had to get tested. And I don't want to know what would happen to you if you forgot to go get your COVID test. But it just kind of became a part of your daily routine, your walk to breakfast or whatever. It was wild.
And for this Olympics, we're not really going to talk about the contests because we've talked about a ton of contests. But
We've tossed. Yeah.
You took fifth in that Olympics. Do you know that that's your last Olympics? And then what are the emotions of leaving when you didn't kind of achieve the Olympic goal? Although you have the X Games gold. So, I mean, that was the original goal.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, of course, going into it, I knew it was going to be really hard to podium. And I knew I, of course, like could, but I was like, it's going to be tough. And I think for me, everything that I had been through the last year, year and a half, and with my brother and my knee, I was like, I'm doing this one for myself. And that's really what it came down to. And of course, like, too, I did have like the emotion as well of like, I just don't think I'm good enough anymore. And like, I missed my chance last Olympics to have a medal. But honestly, once the event was over and like, even like just that rest of that winter, I was like, I just didn't give a shit anymore. I was like, I don't need Olympic medal. I don't need any medals to like define who I am and what my career looks like. Like for me, it's just been about like who I am as a person and how I've just like hopefully pushed this sport and what I've added to this sport and, being a role model for the next generation. I'm like, that's what's truly important. And I feel like after that Olympics, I was really able to let go of that, like Olympic gold medal is the one thing I'm missing from like my career. And if I get this, like I've done everything. I don't feel that way. Like I don't need that. And I mean, needless to say, I've had an amazing career. So it's also easy for me to say these things.
Yeah, you've crushed it. I mean, I think you've had 7 different X Games medals. You've been to 3 different Olympics. I mean, you've done so many things, and we're not going to talk about all those anymore because we could keep talking. There's so many more things that I could bring up, but we don't have enough time because at this point in the podcast, I have something that I call Inappropriate Questions. I get someone that you know to ask 3 questions, and they can be anything. This time, I had to go with 2 people. So your first question is going to come from Ashley Battersby, and I'm going to read that question because she didn't record it. She had things going on, and she sent me a text with it, so I'll read it, and you can tell that it came from her. I'm not making it up. Then your second one comes from a kid you've known since you were pretty much born, Parkin Costain, or your second 2. So are you ready for question number 1 from Ashley?
I'm ready.
All right. It's hard as a female to pee on Mount Hood Glacier since there are no trees and we are in a park lane all day. When we skied Windells in the summer, did you ever participate with Dania Astley and I when we taught all the ski girls how to pee in the snow in the middle of a run? If so, do you remember what we taught you? Hint, we taught all the girls how to do it anytime, anywhere without hiding behind a jump or a rail.
Yes, it was the best. And a tall tee was necessary,
Okay.
or an A-bomb hoodie. So what you would do, like, I didn't wear bibs until like recently, but back in the day, your hoodies were so long that you could just like pull down your pants and sit in the snow, and your like hoodie would like cover you. And obviously you could just sit in the snow and pee because obviously your pee is warm. It would just go straight down and melt in the snow, and you wouldn't pee on yourself. It was like the easiest thing ever. I can't do it anymore because I don't wear tall tees or I'm in bibs or whatever. But yes, that was like the best hack ever.
All right, so that is awesome. That's a good first question. Now we're going to go with question number 2. This one comes from Parkin, and he knows you a little bit more intimately, I feel like, although that's pretty intimate talking about peeing in the snow. Here we go with his question number 2.
I think I know what this one is. Let's see. Go for it.
White girl Range Rover moment. How many semi-trucks did you total last spring heading out to your first TGR shoot? Just going to leave it there.
Oh my gosh. I actually didn't think it was going to be this one. Parkin, that's not fun.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So I was on Range Rover for 4 years. Super grateful. That was a really fun partnership.
They put you in a new car every year?
I was supposed to, but because of COVID, I only had 2, but I can't complain.
Yeah,
I got to drive
amazing.
a Range Rover for 4 years. Yeah.
You get to park front row at Deer Valley, I would think.
Yeah. If you have a Range Rover, you get to pull up front. No. But, Parkin, why did he ask this question? So last year we were driving from Park City to Wyoming to head back and finish out like the Wyoming segment with TGR. And we just got going a little bit late. Parkin was in his own truck and I had my Range Rover and I was towing my snowmobile. I had like a little single tilt trailer on the back, and the roads were pretty dry. But of course there was this one like corner and the snow had melted in the day and froze on the road, melted out and then froze on the road. So I hit black ice and my trailer lost control, which sent my car freaking all over the road. It was so terrifying. And during that situation, my trailer flipped and my snowmobile fell off my trailer. And I think I was like, I swear, like inches from the guardrail, and I didn't hit it and I gained control back. But once again, when I talk about my angel, my brother, I was like, he was definitely there that day. But anyways, my snowmobile was literally in the middle of the highway and I pulled way up because I was like, I'm not getting this snowmobile out of the highway. And I called 911 immediately. And then I watched 3 semis pile up behind my snowmobile and all slip on the black ice. Yeah. And Parkin was a bit behind me. So he showed up on the accident like way after things got like so bad. I mean, there were trucks in the ditch and another semi in the ditch and no one got hurt, thankfully. But it was traumatizing.
Oh, man. Well, that's not a fun, inappropriate question.
No. So thanks, Parkin.
All right. Well, here's a second inappropriate question. The first 3 seconds got cut off for some reason when I was recording it. I didn't make him re-record it because I think you're going to understand what the question is, but I'm going to play it for you right now.
What did we cook these beans on the stove for and then used some lighters afterwards in my living room as little kids?
Oh my God. Yeah. The classic fart and light it on fire. Everyone's done that, right?
I mean, I've done it. I won't say everyone, but yeah, I've definitely done it.
I mean, if you haven't tried it, you should probably try it.
So you guys strategically ate beans, and then your kids, and you just laid down and you put the lighter down and you waited till you had gas and you did flamethrowers out of your butt.
Absolutely. Yeah. What else do you do as a kid?
I don't know. Especially in Montana, there's not that much going on, I wouldn't think.
Yeah, we were reckless. That's so funny. I didn't expect that question.
What was the question that you expected?
There was another situation. It's bad. I can't believe you didn't say it. With TGR. I mean, I'm not afraid. I'm not ashamed. Other people have probably done it. But of course, you're out in the backcountry all day. We were snowmobiling, like, had to take a shit.
Yeah, that happens.
And I was like rushing. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to go so bad. You really got to get your footing, just make sure everything's comfortable. And I accidentally shit down the side of my ski boot.
Oh, well, that's better than in your bib.
Yeah, exactly. So not too bad. It was easy cleanup. I had like this spray hand sanitizer. But I thought that was going to be the one he was going to mention. But now I'm just outing myself.
Yeah, so it's great that we were able to get that one out anyway.
Yeah.
So that's Inappropriate Questions, and that's our podcast, and your career has been like crazy roller coaster story. I mean, so many highs in the beginning with all the early success, but success means that you need to leave home, which had to be difficult in some respects. And then it was like every goal that you achieved came with a major injury or two. And then finally, when you're healthy and you're ready to crush things, you have a huge personal loss. Or finally, when you're getting healthy, you have this huge personal loss that I can't even imagine. But you're able to power through that. And after all, you're a 3-time Olympian. You have like 7 X Games medals and your whole life ahead of you. So I thank you for sharing your story, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Super stoked to be on the show.
So that was time with Maggie Voisin. And what a great attitude she has. I mean, when I say she went through the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, not too many people come close to experiencing the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat that Maggie has experienced. It's like there were so many times in her life when Maggie had the world at her fingertips and then something terrible would happen. This podcast was another lesson in that while life and living is great, it's not always fair, and sometimes there's no reason for the pain, but it happens. The good news is that it sounds like Maggie has taken all of these life lessons and learned from them. Because some people would look for an escape, and running away from your problems doesn't solve them. Maggie doesn't seem to be running away from anything. She faced everything head on, and that's why she is where she is today. That's the podcast. At this point, I want to thank you for listening and ask you to review me wherever you listen. That and sharing my social posts really do help the show grow, and I appreciate the hell out of you doing it. I also appreciate you checking out my sponsors' ads, their sites, and their products. This show wouldn't be around without these incredible brands. I'm talking about Outdoor Research, Stanley, Elan Skis, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Best Day Brewing, and Windell Ski Camp. Have a great week, everyone.